Hey guys, welcome back to Jay versus Horror. It's Movie Club Week 4, and this week we're talking about Destroyer from 1988. Leron Price picked this film, and it was a good pick, man. Great slasher from the back end of the 80s, where they're a little bit weirder than they are in the front end of the 80s. The front end of the 80s are about summer camps and teenage kids, and as we get to the back end of the 80s, they're trying to take on other ideas, right? So The Destroyer is kind of a strange film. There's several films like this that came out around this time. We talked about that in the group this week. There's Prison, there's Shocker, there's House 3, the horror story. We mentioned a few others, even a modern one called Johnny Frank Garrett's Last Words. So there's several films that take on this kind of plot line where an executed killer comes back to get revenge. This one is one of the schlockier ones out there right now. This should have been a huge hit. It's even got Anthony Perkins in it. He plays the director of a sleazy horror film that is being shot inside a prison. Now, this is also the prison where Lyle Alzado's character, I believe his name is Ivan Moss, was executed, right? And unfortunately, he wasn't actually executed. And there's some weird stuff here. We're not, it's not exactly clear what happened. So he's like half dead and half alive after being electrocuted. But he also has some kind of like genetic thing that makes him now able to he's able to regenerate when he's hurt. So there is a little bit of a paranormal element, even though it doesn't seem like it at first. There are like he's got some X-Men abilities after being electrocuted, I guess. And there's some crazy stuff in this movie. We see Lyle Alzado eating hair and doing all kinds of stuff. And Lyle Alzado is kind of a sad story. Everyone remembers that he was a great, defensive player in the NFL, and then he kind of got sick after that, and he, retired a little bit early. Come to find out, Lyle had used a massive amount of steroids, and I think he ended up with brain cancer and eventually passed away. But I digress. Yeah, it was a sad story that you see his body in the movie, and the guy's he's huge. He's jacked beyond jacked, and this is back when people weren't. I mean, I'm sure even if they were regulated in the NFL at all, they weren't regulated in the film industry. And so once he left the NFL, he was just, able to do whatever he wanted to do. And in this film, yes, he's huge. He's the size of Jason Voorhees, and he's an actual human being. So it kind of, lends a little bit to, what happened to him in his real life. You see that he's 6'4", he's huge. It's impossible almost to be that big, right? But anyway, yeah. So you kind of imagine that somebody probably talked Lyle into this film. They probably said, "Hey, man, look, this is how it works. You have Arnold had to do Terminator before he could be a big star. He had to play the big bad guy before he could be a big star." And so they talked him into this. I mean, if you think about it, the Destroyer, the Terminator, the Predator, he kind of fell for this. Yeah, that sounds like it's in that line. And yeah, one good film here as a crazy bad guy, and I'll get a lead action role. And it just didn't happen like that. Lyle Alzado's best role, who someone actually mentioned on this, was probably in Ernest Goes to Camp because it was funny and it wasn't serious, and he wasn't someone you could take seriously. He was kind of a celebrity. Now, I remember Lyle Alzado very much from the 80s, but maybe some people don't because he wasn't like a Hall of Fame football player. I'll say he was legendary just because of his size and what he could do to people, but he wasn't necessarily a Hall of Fame type NFL player, but he was a celebrity just because he was so huge, right? And he did do a few acting gigs and movies and stuff. But yeah, I remember him very well. And of course, I remember Anthony Perkins. Now, when this film was released on Blu-ray, it was actually a double release. It was released with Edge of Sanity, which is a great film from Anthony Perkins, where he plays I don't want to give too much away about that film because it's kind of got a little twist to it, but it's playing off Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, but it's also playing off Jack the Ripper. And it's also kind of like a sleazy giallo in a way. A very fun film, Edge of Sanity. If you ever get a chance, check that one out. But yeah, Anthony, shows up in this one, and he plays the director of this Death Dollies film that they're shooting inside the haunted prison that they think is haunted. Everybody's saying it's haunted. It's really not. I don't know if it's haunted or not. Is he dead? Is he dead? He's not dead. He's like half dead. That's the way they describe it. But yeah, and so there's some fun stuff because they get to make the movie really terrible, and then they blame it on the movie that they're making in the movie, right? So there's like a shower scene where all these girls are just standing around naked. So there's no other place in this film where they use nudity except there. and they use it like saying, okay, we're making a bad movie inside the movie, so we're doing nudity inside that movie. It's not really this movie. This movie's higher class than that, right? So they do some fun stuff like that in the movie, but overall, it's not great, right? The kills could have been better, and they could have just went for it more in this film, really, because they had all the elements. The story's not that bad. I mean, the plot line. Um, and you have Lyle Alzado. He's a great killer, very intimidating guy. And you have Anthony Perkins to kind of like anchor the ship. He's a horror icon. So you wonder where this went wrong. But in my opinion, none of these films were really, really great. House, the horror story is pretty good. It's fun to watch. Shocker is a fun watch. And also Prison is a really good watch. It may be the best out of all of them, but and it's got Viggo Mortensen in it. So yeah, but none of them really just nailed this concept, and that's why I think we kept seeing it get reshuffled and different people trying it. Hey, let me have a shot at it, that type thing. So let's read everyone else's reviews, and then we'll pick who's going to choose our next film. Let's get over to Jay versus Horror, guys. If you haven't joined us, there's a link in the description. Join us. We got 25,000 horror fans over there, and all we talk about is horror. No politics or religion or bullcrap like that. We like our horror films, and we don't like people who come in to bully other people, so we don't put up with that. So let's look at some of the responses for The Destroyer. So we had a couple posts for this, so several. Laron, who picked the film, said this was definitely cheesy, but a very fun film, and unfortunately, you're right about Lyle Alzado, yes. Chris Olsen, who picked last week's film, said this is one of the cheesiest and sleaziest of the late 80s slasher cycle, but also one of the silliest and stupidest. Poor acting and an unscary killer don't help. There were quite a few of these executed killer pictures out at this time. I'm not sure which one was the best, but I know for sure Destroyer was one of the worst. Absolutely, yeah. Destroyer is fun, though. It's fun in its own right because it's so terrible, right? It's not. It doesn't really even qualify as so bad it's good, though. It's just really bad. And I think the best thing about Destroyer is the star power and just watching these people try anyway, right? Ingo Dirk Schneider says, I think it might have been mentioned before, but boy, oh boy, this is cheesy. Surprised I had never heard of it, especially as it features the great Anthony Perkins. But then again, he's not really that present in this film. I really enjoyed it and could see the potential for a sequel in it, but maybe it's for the best that there wasn't one. Yeah, I understand that. That thought process. And Anthony is in the film, but like he said, he is just kind of sprinkled out through it. I'm not going to give too much away here, but there is a pretty cool scene with Anthony at the end where I don't even want to tell you. There's a terrible effect. Okay, there's a terrible effect, but the scene is funny, I thought. So yeah, I'm not lying to you guys. I'm not telling anyone this was a great film. I'm just saying it was fun to watch this week and talk about and know that everyone else had to watch it too. That was funny. So let's look at some more comments. Stephen Parker said, I had high hopes for this one, but after the first 5 minutes, Alzado needed someone to pick a bee on his way to the chair was hilarious. Then it devolves into a really bad movie about making a really bad movie. The melting of a doll in the chair was probably the best kill in the whole film. It was also pretty PG until that random shower scene. Cut that out, and I bet this played on USA Up All Night a bunch of times. Kind of felt like a knockoff of Maniac Cop, even to the point that he put on the cop uniform. But I am not sure if that came out before this. To Jay's point, this is definitely a Joe Bob Briggs type of flick. Yeah, it's definitely a Joe Bob flick. Something you would have saw on Monster Vision, or even before Monster Vision when Joe Bob was doing the movie channel, Last Drive-In at the movie channel. Yeah, it's hard not to notice the similarity to Maniac Cop, which also like the Maniac Cop movies were coming out around the same time as this. So they kind of try to play off of everything that they could, and nothing really worked. It's like when you throw everything at the wall, but nothing really sticks, And Stephen Doherty says this is the one where they replaced his head on most of the posters with a skull. Or did someone just rip it off? No, this is the one where they actually replaced Lyle's head with a skull on the poster of the film. Not originally. That happened later for some reason. Now, I don't know, like, if maybe it had something to do with the steroid use where they didn't want to be connected to Lyle after a certain amount. Because it was a pretty big news story when it came out that he had cancer from taking steroids. He took so many steroids. Mark Schwartz says, So far, no mention of Lyle eating hair on this post. I remember that scene from my first viewing of Destroyer back in late 80s with my buddies that picked it out because they were football fans. Interesting. Yeah, that's a reason why people would pick this out. And, I even saw that, like, there were some pictures of this, like, in a video shop, like the box, and there was a little sticker on it that said action. Like, they were trying to sell it as an action movie, like Terminator or something. You know what I mean? And Andrew Rhino Blackwell. Andrew's going to get to pick soon, I can tell you, because Andrew's commented on every one that we've done so far. Andrew says the electric chair to an ordinary man is the end, but when serial killer Ivan Moser sat down, he was just getting warmed up. Now he's half the man and twice the animal. Everyone thought he just died. No one ever dreamed he'd become Destroyer, the ultimate killing machine. If you like a horror movie set in a prison with an execution where you know that the jolt from the chair is not going to kill the person, but instead make things worse, this is definitely one you need to watch. Great review there, Andrew. Russell, we're waiting on your review, buddy. I got this out a little bit early. Usually I do it on Sundays, but this week I did it on Saturday. And yeah, and then George Rogers says, I prefer my Lyle Azedo fighting Ernest P. Worrell. And Michael Monty says, you fucking beat me to that. I can't believe it. Yep, absolutely. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to go ahead and pick our next person who's going to choose a movie. And I'm going to go, this is what I'm going to do. These are going to be our next three. I'm going to tell you right now, our next three. I can tell you our next three because these guys have been participating every week. Andrew Rhino Blackwell is going to be our next one. He's going to pick our next film. Russell De Silva will pick the film after that. Russell's in India. He's a big film critic there. So we're going to give Russell a little bit of advance notice. That way he's got time to pick something that we can all watch. He can watch, we can watch, because the streaming services are very different there than they are here. And we may have to iron something, give us a little time to work something out before we get there. You know what I mean? And then thirdly, after that, we'll go with George Rogers. George is one of my all-time favorites. Runs a couple podcasts of his own. He's a great guest to have on a podcast. So yeah, we'll go that direction for the next three guys. Everybody participate, comment. If you comment, you like, you participate, we're going to give you a chance to pick our next film. And we don't duplicate. We don't double dime here. Okay. If you get to pick one, you don't get to pick again until everybody else gets to pick. Now, how do we know that? Well, we'll figure it out when we get there. I don't think it's going to be that big of a problem. We got about 40 or 50 people participating every week, and we're trying to pick the ones who participate the most. And guys, that's all we got for this week. We will talk to you the next time we got something worth talking about. Bye.